Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. So, I'm a 50 going on 51-year-old male who lives alone. My wife, with whom I had a son, left me pretty early in our marriage, and I haven't met anyone after that with whom I'd like to settle down. Although my current life is a great one without any worries of financial or any other kind, my life when I first got married and had a child was way different. I was an alcoholic back then, and I'm not proud of the things I did. Days used to pass by without me realizing, and I couldn't hold a job for anything. But after my wife left me and took away our son, I was really alone for the first time. Initially, I didn't care much, but starvation and being on the streets made me realize if I want to live, I had to change myself. That's when I decided to get sober and get a decent job. Since my major was in computer science, it wasn't hard for me to find freelance contracts. Once I got enough money, I signed myself up for rehab and got sobered up. But even after all that, I didn't try to contact my wife or child. It wasn't because I didn't want to apologize or anything. I just didn't want to face a part of my life that I was ashamed of. And since I didn't have to consciously face them, I never tried. I kept living my life and doing better. Once I was out of rehab and 1 year sober, I started working on an app and sold it to one of the gaming companies. The money I got from it was more than enough for me to settle down and start fresh. With a decent portfolio after the development of that app, I got myself a regular job and lived my life peacefully. But a few weeks ago, my son forced me into meeting him by visiting me at my house. When I heard the knock at the door, I wondered who it could be since I don't get many visitors. I opened the door and couldn't recognize the man standing on my porch. I asked him who he was and what was his business with me. The man simply stared at me for a while. Then he told me he's my son and he'd like to come inside and talk. I was surprised to hear that since he didn't resemble me at all. I invited him inside, though. Initially, he didn't talk much. The situation was very awkward. I wasn't ready for this sudden confrontation. I wanted to apologize for not being in his life and not being a man enough to look after him. I wanted to say sorry for being a drunkard back then. But seeing him right there in front of me was so awkward that anything I would have said would sound like an excuse. So I kept my mouth shut. I waited for him to start talking and say what he came here to say. He took a deep breath and told me that he doesn't care about what happened all these years ago. He told me that I'm an a hole who used to drink and beat him up and that he had come to terms with his past. He said either way, he isn't afraid of me anymore, and now he's big enough to handle me if I tried anything. He continued telling me about himself then and how he left home after high school and had to take student loans to get through college. He said he got a job after college, but with all his loans and everything, it's barely enough. He told me he's also married now and has a son, and he's doing his damn best to be a great father, unlike me. But something can't be helped, and even after everything he has done, he is still short on money and he needs to pay off his debt if he doesn't want to lose his house and his family. He told me he looked into me not a long while ago and he knows that now I'm loaded in money. He said he was never planning to come here, but desperate times call for desperate measures. He then told me that as his father, the least I could do is pay off his student loans since I didn't even bother to pay child support. For treating him like crap all these years ago, I can make up for it by clearing his debt, and if I don't feel like doing that, he'll actually make sure that I'm dead to him for real. I didn't expect to be threatened by him. Sure, I was already feeling guilty, of course, now I had money to help him out, but to meet him out of the blue and be threatened by him, that rubbed me off the wrong way. I would have believed it if I was the one to raise him, but I knew his mother, and she'd never raise a child that goes around threatening people. I needed to know the truth, but I also knew he wasn't going to tell me anything more. So I quietly agreed to give him money and waited for him to leave. Then I made some calls and looked him up online. Through social media and some other sources, I found out that his wife is in the hospital. I called the hospital and asked them about the bills pending on a certain patient. Turns out his wife has been sick for a long time and is getting treated for years now. I went down to the hospital that day and took care of the pending bills and even made a donation that would take care of future care. Next day, when my son received a call from the hospital about his bills being cleared and his wife finally being ready to receive the treatment, he rushed there. I was with his wife when he came in, and as soon as he saw me, he got angry. He couldn't bear to see his bastard father mix up with his family. He pulled me aside and told me to leave the place at once. He told me that I'm not welcome to be a part of his present, and he'd like me to just be his horrible past that he doesn't have to think about. Then he told the nurse that I'm not allowed to visit his family. I left the hospital after that and hadn't contacted him again. I know what I've done is awful, but it is too much to ask for forgiveness and move on. Is my son's behavior still justified after I helped him out? Am I not entitled to some time where I can explain to him my side of the story? I tried contacting my son again and again after he kicked me out of the hospital. Now that this chapter of my past life was opened, I couldn't just leave it at that. At first, it was really hard to talk to him because he kept ignoring my calls and texts. He wouldn't let me go anywhere near his family and even threatened to get a restraining order if I didn't quit harassing him. But I couldn't give up, and finally he agreed to listen to me. I told him that we could meet at my place, but he refused, saying that he doesn't want to set foot in my house ever again. He told me he would much rather meet at a public place where having people around would give him some sanity and control to hear me out. Whatever his reason was, I was just glad to be able to talk to him, and so we agreed to meet at a cafe. I'll go meet him tomorrow and then update what happened. I finally met my son, was able to talk to him. I wrote in my original post about my past and how my relationship with my son wasn't exactly something I was proud of. So when I met him yesterday, the first thing I did was apologize to him. I told him how sorry I was for how I behaved in the past. I didn't want to make any excuses nor blame the school for my behavior, but I did want him to know that once his mother left me and took him with her, I felt the worst I had ever felt in my life. The hurt was the motivation for me to quit alcohol, and once I did manage to get sober, all I thought about was him and his mother. But I still didn't have anything to give to them, and it took me a while to become the man that he could call his father without being embarrassed. I told him about how once I did manage to be a responsible adult, I was too guilt ridden and was too cowardly to face him since a lot of time had passed. I kept tabs on him through social media and watched him grow up into a fine young man in all those pictures. But every time I would see his face, I would convince myself that he's better off without me and there's no place for me in his life. I told him that I justified my own cowardly behavior and never tried to reach out to him, but I really mean it when I say I felt pathetic and sorry every single day for leaving a child behind. I realize that I have no right to ask for his forgiveness, but I still want to apologize if it's possible at all. I would like to help him out now as much as possible. There's no way for me to fix my past mistakes or change the father he didn't have, but I am a responsible man now, and I would really like to be a part of his family and, if possible, a part of his kid's life. He listened to me for a long while and told me that he would think about what I've said. He then told me thanks for taking care of the hospital payments and taking a load off his back. He said there's no way that he can just forgive me in a second for everything, but that he is willing to give it a thought. And he also promised that if his wife is okay with it, he'd let me meet his kids. But he warned me not to get my hopes up because there is still a lot of bad blood between us, and he's not sure that even time could fix all of that. I was just glad that he was at least talking to me without screaming. Soon after that, we both left the restaurant, and I gave him my number and asked him to contact me for anything he needs. I'll be happy to help him out. I know what I did was really unforgivable, and my relationship with my son is not something that can be fixed that easily, but you can't blame a man for hoping. YTA, there's no amount of words of penance in the world that could make up for a man who let alcohol ruin his son's life. It's one thing to have a problem and be an addict, but it's another thing to be an alcoholic and beat up your family. YTA, you brought that son of yours into this world and you should have been responsible for his growth and well being. You failed to do the bare minimum, and yet now you're complaining about him being mad at you? I think there's no bigger a hole than you. I'm currently on holiday with my father, stepmom, three brothers, and my 6-year-old daughter. My youngest brother is 8, the others are adults. I'm a single mom and we live quite far away from them, so we don't see them that often. I wouldn't say I have a particular parent style, as it's just me and her. I'd say it's possibly a mix between gentle and child led. But I'm a young mom. She was born when I was 17. And so the only friends of mine who have kids are babies, so I don't really have much to compare with. I'm aware I could possibly be too relaxed with her in comparison to other parents, but she's a very well behaved, kind, and confident kid, so I'd like to think whatever I'm doing is working. But like I said, I don't have much to compare it to, so I could be wrong. In comparison to my father and stepmom's parenting, it appears very relaxed. I give my daughter the choice on what she wants to do every day, using when she's in the kids' club to do what I want to do. I let her choose her meals from the buffet, though insist on at least a certain amount of salad. And as we're on holiday, I've increased her bedtime by an hour so she can go to the kids' disco every evening. I thought all of this was pretty reasonable, but my dad and stepmom asked me to change my rules on the morning of day 3 of the holiday. Their reasoning for this is that their son is jealous that he couldn't have pizza for dinner, doesn't get to go to the disco in the evening, and didn't get to go to the beach because they wanted to go to the markets. I told them that he's always welcome to come to do what me and my daughter are doing if they want to enjoy the holiday and do different, less child oriented things, and they said this wasn't the point. I outright refused to change the boundaries and choices I've outlined for my daughter, and I told them that it didn't feel fair to me to start limiting my daughter's holiday when she's had no problems herself so far. It felt a little like punishing her for no reason. They got really upset and said I was being unfair to my brother as he was upset. I apologized and told them I regretted not having the thought to discuss things like this before, but told them I wasn't going to change my daughter's days. They were obviously angry, but walked away and texted to say they were going to start sitting at separate tables for meals and are also obviously avoiding us throughout the day. One of my brothers has sided with me and hangs out with us, and the other with them. They both want the other to apologize so we can start hanging out all together. Though I want this, I really don't want to start limiting my daughter's freedom. My other brother told me my stepmom had called me a bitch over dinner for not budging and ruining the holiday for everyone. All of us paid for the holiday. My father and stepmom paid more as it's a price per person, including my youngest brother. There's 3 of them. They also paid for one of my older brothers. I paid for myself and my daughter and one of my brothers, the one who sided with me. They're both students, so couldn't afford the price on their own, and we all wanted to go on a holiday together. But my dad and stepmom couldn't afford both. You're clearly NTA. They're being bizarrely authoritarian for no practical reason and are angry that you've shown them up. If your child can eat pizza with salad and on holiday and can go to the explicitly for children disco, then why can't theirs? If they had a good reason, they'd explain it to their child. If they don't, they just look bad because they actually are bad. NTA, good for you, Mama. You're doing everything you should be. An amazing job standing up for your baby. Their rules for their child don't have diddly squat to do with your rules for your child. This is a good lesson for your brother, actually. Life isn't fair. And you've not ruined anything their selfish, entitled, boundary smashing behaviors have. Editing to add. They are further the AHs for calling you names and then basically emotionally blackmailing you into submission by purposely avoiding you until you cave into their demands. My sister and I are both pregnant at the same time. She's 30 and I'm 24. She has a 3-year-old daughter and is expecting a boy this time. She announced her son's name back in April and told everyone that the name was set in stone, so feel free to use the name in gifts and stuff if we want. I didn't announce our daughter's name officially yet. Some people know just because I was close enough to them and we were talking names. My sister asked me outright and I told her it's Oceana. And she was not impressed at all. She asked me what was wrong with a name like Elizabeth or maybe a little Beatrice or Margaret. I told her nothing for those who like those names, but they are not for my husband or me. She then said there's always Emily, Haley, Anna, Marie. I told her to stop, that we knew our girl's name before we even knew she was a girl, and it wasn't going to change for her. She went into a FB mommy group and shared the name with moms and moms to be in there and wanted people to help her figure out how to change my mind. She went on a long ass rant about how my taste in names is terrible and how she's shocked I would like a name like this, that I am ruining my child's life. I am rejecting all the beautiful, lovely names of the last several years. That her, Gather, and Eugene are going to be envied and hated by my child and all future kids of mine for their gorgeous names. Someone I know is in the group and sent me screenshots of the post. She made sure and stayed up top for over a week with all her complaints and rantings. She also had some people more than willing to help. The last time I saw her was 3 weeks ago, and she was giving me more names to consider: Rosemary, Vivienne, Francesca, Lillian, Martha, Geraldine, etc. I rolled my eyes and told her to focus on her own kids' names instead of mine, and that she needs to get over it and stop ranting to the world. She told me not to be so dismissive of her and that I insulted her kids' names, which I did not. I just told her to focus on them. She told me I should not want to name my child something her family will hate. She told me I was rude to her and she had genuine concerns. AITA? NTA. I think Oceania is a stupid name for the record, but it's none of my damn business. People need to chill. If the kid doesn't like it, she can go by Anna, Shayna, Shay, or a half dozen other nicknames. Or she might grow to dig it. I have a nice, plain, boring name that I share with not one, not two, but three uncles. One by birth, two by marriage. I would have loved to have something more unique. And when it came time to name our son, we did. Nothing fancy, but he's the only one in his class. All this is to say there is more in heaven and earth than is dreamt of in your sister's philosophy. There are countless names, and the only way to normalize names is to meet people who have them. Sadly, it's going to be her doing the bullying of Oceana, thus making her prediction true. You should keep your kid away from her. NTA. NTA, it's not like you're calling your daughter Caligula or MILF, two kids I actually know. Oceana is unusual but not awful or offensive. If she doesn't like it, then your daughter could choose to go by Anna, which isn't short for anything, so no one will think to ask. Your sister needs to butt out.